Say the name Brent Lay in Jackson, Tennessee, and you get many reactions. Some ask, who is he? Some believe that he used school board members to create obstructions that led to the resignation of Dr. Eric Jones as school superintendent. Others want to know why he suddenly reappeared at a school board committee meeting Tuesday to offer a comprehensive remake of the school district by eliminating middle schools. Still others who know him as a minister see him as one of the finest men in our community. Whatever your view of him, we hope you stay with us for part 2 of our one-on-one interview with the education advocate and former juvenile court services director. We pick up where I ask him about recent turbulence on the school board. Why is it, from your perspective, that some of the people, including those 3 that you faced in the long-range planning committee, and at least 2 other school board members on a regular basis, seem to not go along with this man's proposal, his 10-year plan? And how did you feel about his 10-year plan?
Well, you'll have to ask each of those board members.
I have asked those people about that.
They vote different ways and they have different opinions, and I don't.
Not all the time.
Control, but they have agreed on a few things.
They have agreed on many things.
But I think number one, I think they're very pro Eric Jones, and I've always been pro Eric Jones. I was for him months before he ever became appointed to the superintendency.
Then where were you during the time that this school board and district was having so much turmoil during the past 9 months in particular?
Right. So, and again, you make a good point. Our problem has been on the last 8 years, been taking a nosedive, not the last 9 months. Sometimes, I don't think you mean to imply it, but sometimes it's been implied that, wow, our school board's gone to pot in the last 8-9 months. It's really gone down the last 8 years.
Can you not agree that there have been very turbulent times on this school board, to the point that in the last 2 months there have been suggestions that this board come together and attempt to have reconciliation? Whether it comes to one suggestion that we all get together and break bread, but attempts made to reconciliation, it still hasn't happened, and we haven't even seen the first step toward that.
Well, I'm all about reconciliation, and I'm all about collaboration and working towards middle ground. I mean, and this happens to have some political ramifications, and in politics, that's the way it is. The old saying is, you get a half a loaf is better than no loaf. Yeah. So you better get to the table and work it out. And by the way, that was always my attitude. I felt like Dr. Jones, if he'd stayed, it all would have got worked out. As far as trying to...
You think so? You really think it would have all been worked out if he stayed?
Well, I think so. I mean, they have strong opinions. They were elected. Like I say, Doris Black would not have got elected without that Northside Elementary proposal.
While you're at it, rate Doris Black's performance as a school board member from your perspective.
I would give her a banquet tomorrow if I could. She has done, for one thing, we wouldn't even be thinking about the bypass property if not been for Doris Black putting on the brakes, or even Kevin Alexander for that matter. Because it'd been a done deal. That train had pulled out. The Ashport Road property we've talked about for 2 years. So they turned.
What's wrong with that? Other than you've talked about traffic patterns.
It kills Pope School.
There are a lot of people who would supremely disagree with you that it would kill Pope School.
If you're going to triple the traffic within 800 yards or half a mile, I mean, it's just practical.
Have you had specific traffic studies to back up what you're saying?
Well, have you had traffic studies to back up what you're saying?
I'm just asking you the question because you're the one making the proposal.
All I know is we have, as a school district, in the last 3 years, we've had to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to get more traffic off Ashport Road as it is. And we're talking about going from 600 to a total of 1,800 students within the same proximity. I mean, you don't have to be a traffic expert to know cars are cars.
How do we know that we wouldn't have a similar problem, because you're going to have big cars coming off the bypass to go to where the proposed land is?
Well, but that's, if you go out there where the proposed land is, just as you approach the bypass, there's a turn lane. You're talking about a whole different ball game. Plus, you're only 100 yards the driveway will be to the bypass, and probably a red light, and so there you go. You got all kinds of mobility, and it's so much better. I mean, it's daylight and dark differences as far as I'm concerned, and the marketability of attracting others into our district.
All right, now I'm going to ask you a question, and you know this has been suggested in our community, so I'm going to give you the floor to answer it. Do you personally own, or anybody that is in your family or anybody that is close to you, do they own property that is near this site in North Jackson that potentially they could benefit from a school being built there?
No, I own some property. My daughter, Caroline, who came to University, her first house we bought, helped buy, she bought out at Roming. I still have ownership out there on Roming. So I suppose that's about 1 mile or so away from that area. But actually, you know, I mean, I don't know. That's not, I wouldn't say that's going to be any kind of benefit for me personally.
How about rental property that you may own close to Northside High School?
Well, actually, I don't own any property within walking distance of Northside High School.
I didn't say walking distance. I said close to Northside High.
I own a home at Charging, and I own a home way out at Sagewood, Thelma Barker.
Do you recall at any time during the Vision 2020 negotiations, do you recall at any time talking to a school board member and saying that you had rental property that would benefit from improving schools near that rental property?
No, I think that's completely mistrue. What I say is I pay a whole lot of taxes. And I'm saying, you know, if the taxes just went up 13%, as you well know, this last year, and boy, when you own property, that's a nightmare. And I'm very much, that's why I'm very conservative. I am very conservative. I don't want to spend $15 million here. If you let the Pope School dry up because you put that other school right adjacent to it, if you don't open Melissa's back up, that's another $15,000. If you don't use the north building at Northside, that's another $15,000. I mean, $15 million. That's $45 million, Steve. That's a lot of money to lose as a taxpayer.
All right. Do you think your plan would save that kind of money for this community?
Absolutely.
$45 million.
Well, it's just obvious. I mean, if you put Melissa's back online, you know the plan I call for calls for Montessori, which we have a waiting list, going back to West Bemis, which we already know works. It was out there for 9 years or so, so you know it works. Put Melissa's back online, that saves us $15 million. Use the north building at Northside, that's $15 million. And like I say, don't overcrowd the traffic situation around Pope. That saves another $15 million. That's $45 million.
Have you had this plan independently vetted by financial experts who would back up your assertions that it would save that kind of money?
Well, what it boils down to, how much does the school cost? And we're talking about spending $15-20 million for this new school.
I'm just asking the question.
Well,
have you had it vetted independently? Because it's easy for you to say that to a school board, but if it hasn't been independently vetted by people who say, okay, Dr. Lay is correct, it will do this for us. How do we know that just on the basis that you say this?
Well, I think it's common knowledge that elementary schools cost $15 million. Our county commission's talked about it, our school board's been talking about it for the last 8 years. They've always mentioned figures like 15 to 20 million, actually. I don't think I have to go find an expert to say that, because it's public knowledge.
How successful do you think it would be to be able to get this plan through the county commission? Because they're the bankers. You know this. They're the ones who have to approve this money. And this is, in some people's eyes, including some county commissioners, and there were some yesterday who commented about your presentation, there are some who would look at this and say, this is a drastic reworking of what we were looking at and what we signed off on 2 years ago. How successful do you think this would be to get through the county commission?
I think it'd be absolutely, I went for the county commission for 14 years. Anytime I stand before them and say, I know a way you can save $45 million, I had a good chance.
They're going to pay attention, yeah, there's no question about it.
I usually got the votes, so anything that saves money. That's how we got the old Union campus, former Union campus purchased. I was the one, the driving force behind, you know, we got the $550 million, and it was no problem getting that passed. It passed with 17 votes. Even a conservative like Hal Wallace was very much for it, because he said, well, this is going to save us millions of dollars. So anytime you can save taxpayers millions of dollars, but what's so sweet about this approach is not only are we saving tax dollars, but we are going to have a much better school district, which is going to draw in more people to Madison County. We lose industry because any way you look at it, get on the internet. I ask your audience to get on the internet, look at School Digger, look at Niche, look at greatschools.com, and you will see Madison County is ranked in the bottom eight of 140 districts.
All right, you kept repeating that quite frequently during your presentation to the Long Range Planning Committee, 132nd out of 140 districts. All right, let me ask you just a very pointed question on this subject. This is the type of plan that typically is presented by someone who is a superintendent of schools. That's what you usually see happen. Eric Jones had a 10-year plan, and it was signed off on by the City Council, the Chamber of Commerce, the County Commission. It was approved by 2 different school boards. Okay, under this, I'm going to ask you a straight-up question. Do you want to be superintendent of schools?
I'm not ruling it out.
You're not ruling it out. Okay.
But I am very much.
If they came to you and say, Brent Lay, let's say this, I'm going to be hypothetical with you for a minute. There are probably 5 votes on this school board that could pass this plan. More than likely. I know there were a lot of things said about, well, we need to look at the dollars and cents, and that's a smart move. Anybody would want to look at the dollars and cents, and you didn't have those figures.
Right.
But if they came to you and said, I'm talking about a majority of the school board, and said, we would like for you not just to present this plan, but to administer this plan as director of schools, would you accept it?
Number one, I don't aspire to be. I'm 68 years old.
Right, but you said you wouldn't rule it out.
I would not rule it out. But I'll tell you right now, I'm very happy with Ray Washington. I support Ray Washington. Ray Washington, I've known Ray Washington for 20 years. He's a fair-minded fellow.
Ray Washington is a fine man.
And he's good. He's mentioned, what I loved about what he said when he was applying or whatever, interviewing, he kept saying collaborate, collaborate. And I think that's exactly the nature of the spirit we should go at things. Now, you and I don't agree on things, but we should try to work towards the middle.
There's no question. That's what the board has been talking about, about trying to have reconciliation, but it seems as though every time there is a step toward that, one of the board members comes up with a comment or a situation that absolutely throws that. Let me ask you a question about this. I asked you to rate Doris Black as a school board member, and you gave us a straight answer. Rate Morris Merriweather as a school board member.
You know, Morris represents his district. His district, those voters, they have a right to elect Morris Merriweather. He went to every door. He's a hard worker. He might, you know, and he's new at this. He may have not done it all the right way. He'd be the first one to admit that. He didn't understand exactly how it all worked, but he is representing his district. And those folks over there, they have a right to elect who they want to elect.
It's not a question I'm arguing about that they have a right. That's not my question. My question is to rate his performance as a school board member, because you're talking about a man who has been censured by the county commission, and it was a unanimous vote of the ethics committee that he conducted himself in a fashion that was not proper for an elected official.
And that's their latitude. But really and truly, Steve, I don't think it's right for you to rate school board members. I don't think it's right for me to rate the school board members. I didn't rate the school board members we had before, and they went against something that I thought like was wrong with the 2020 plan. But I didn't bash them. I mean, it was just they did what they felt like was the best thing to do at the time. In fact, I was really excited when you and I were having an interchange back in 2015. I appreciate what Cal Spurgeon did, the Chamber of Commerce did, because you well know they raised $150,000.
They did.
And got that Vision 2020 started. If it had not been for Vision 2020, I probably never would have been involved, because I started going to those community meetings, and I heard meeting after meeting after meeting, parents saying, we want community schools, we want K-8 schools. And it's well documented. If you go through the files for 2020 meetings, K-8 schools. And our school board at the time talked about K-8 schools most of the time. And so it looked like to me it was going to be a two-step process. We're going to go close some schools, then we're going to convert schools all across the county to K-8s. So really it comes out of Vision 2020. Well, the first part happened, they closed 5 schools. But whatever reasons, I guess it was the funding and all this, we've not gone with the K-8 system. But actually, really, the K-8 system is what the board during 2020 was very much an advocate of, and they totally voted to do it out here at Pope School to make that a K-8. They turned around and converted Rose Hill, as you well know, to K-8. And you know, one of our best schools in the county is Montessori School. It's a K-8 school.
Absolutely.
And Henderson County's got one of the highest ranking districts next to us, They're all K-8 schools.
You said in your presentation that some of what you are proposing can be done within 90 days. Now that frightens some people because the feeling was, okay, if you get this board to go along with this, this could be happening and could potentially, I'm just quoting some people who listened to what you said could potentially disrupt the district in the middle of a school year or the first third of a school year if you tried to implement some of this. First off, what would you implement in the first 90 days?
Yeah, actually what I said was you start phasing it in.
Well,
this
okay,
school year.
all right, I give you that.
And-
but what would you start doing?
Our three worst situations in Madison County right now, and has been for 3 years, is Pope School and Thelma Barker. Let me deal with those two first. I would take 8 teachers and those 200 students from Thelma Barker, 8 teachers and 200 students from Pope, put them in the north building of Northside. And even over the next 60 days, the students at Northside could be working their way into that one big building, which is plenty of room. And they could, and in fact, I went to get some figures today. All they do is have to convert the toilets. They need some of the smaller toilets for the K through 2s, which is just changing out a fixture and lowering the sinks. That's the major move. And then also, you might have to put some restrooms that have to be connected to the classrooms, like was done at Rose Hill. Okay. And then you have to put in a new playground. But we've done all this many times in this district, and it's not that expensive. I don't think, I said 500,000, said less than 500,000. It only may be 200,000. But this is something, I tell you, if you were to put out the word this afternoon to parents, in fact, I want parents to start calling their board members, say, yes, I'm at Pope School, I'm at Thelma Barker, and if you open that new school up at Northside Elementary, I'll sign up, because I'm tired of my kids being overcrowded at Pope and Thelma Barker. I'm tired of my kids going to some of the worst ranked schools in the state because they're overcrowded. Parents know it's overcrowded, and we can relieve that. And by October, we could put that first phase in, and those teachers could move, and the students would go with them. And I think you have.
How wise is that when students are just barely 2 months into school?
Well,
here's
why it
how
works.
advisable is that to disrupt?
You're staying with the same teacher, you're staying with the same class. You're just going to a different location, and parents are for it. Parents will be for it.
How do you select, though, the students and the teachers that move? How do you select those?
Well, first of all, you let the parents have some input, which is very important. We're not letting parents have very much input these days. I mean, they either have to go to Pope School where they're zoned, or they don't have a choice. They have to go to a private school or move up to Gibson County, and that's what they've done a great deal over the last years. But this way, you put it out there and say, we're willing to open Northside up at the North Building as an elementary school, and you let parents start responding. And they respond, and then you've asked for teachers to volunteer to do it. You do it on a voluntary basis and a marketing basis. But that solves two of our crucial situations. It is a crime, we've already done it for 3 years, to go for another 2 years before a new school is built, to let these children suffer, and we as taxpayers are paying $10,400 per child. Why are we shooting ourselves in the foot?
You also talked about Liberty Tech High School. You talked about that, and of course the board made Morris Merriweather said that we've talked about this a lot, and we have the same gangs, we have the same problems at the school that we've had over and over again. Okay, for our discussion, let's assume that what Mr. Merriweather says is true. All right, but you put it down that you said that problems at Liberty were connected to a sharp increase in the student population there.
No doubt
Why do you say that?
Well, because in 2011, they had 782 students, and they were ranked in the top 40% of all high schools in Tennessee. Year before last, they had 1,091 students, and last year 990 students, and they were ranked in the bottom 2%. Can you imagine that? Going from 60%, a loss of 58% in ranking in that many years. Now, it's not because of the principals, it's not because of the superintendent, it's not because of the board, it's because we've crowded. In this case, it's double-edged sword or double danger, because not only have we crowded, but with those demographics, we're talking about high schoolers that are involved in gangs. And anyone knows in East Jackson, you don't ever want to mix one gang, and you don't want 3 gangs represented on the same campus. So we should never in Madison County again have a high school over 800.
All right, but I got to come back to you again, just like I did in asking you the question about Pope. Let's deal with this. How do you decide what 250 or 300 students get dispersed to other schools and guarantee yourself, according to your plan, that this is going to solve the problems that this school has had?
I talk to parents all the time, but you just have to approach it like this. This is the way I would approach Liberty. First of all, I'd take the early high schools, or early high students who are very resilient, very smart. They go to college half a day. They go to Jackson State anyway. And there's 225 of them as of last year. I would ask them to go across the street to Madison where there's space, classrooms. It's not going to be a problem, or either go to a wing at Liberty. And then I would recruit and market and say between now and October 1st, all those parents who want their child to go, their student to go to a new JCM, the ratio will be 2 or 3
now,
better.
by new JCM, are you talking about the old JCM building?
No, I'm talking early college house.
Early college?
One of the nicest buildings we have in the
I
district.
want to make sure we're clear on that.
And drop it down, all you can. I'd pick up 4 more teachers in my mind, and that would bring, I think we're at 16-to-1 now ratio, bring it on down there to about 12 or 13, because what you're conveying to parents, in fact, also, it costs $600 a course now to dual credit. I'm not so sure to throw that in the package too, but you want to make it as attractive as you can. And you will have, I think within a month, you will have your 200 students and a waiting list. Try it out. If it doesn't work, what have you lost?
All right, I got a couple of other issues before we wind this down that I really want to get to you about. One is, you mentioned this briefly in your presentation to the board. We have commitments, and it looks as though the financing is going to be there for the city-county dual situation where the county will build one new high school and the city will build a new one itself. It's somewhat unprecedented since we've had a consolidated school district. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I'm for new schools. I'd love to have all new schools. I'm not against that. I really, like I said yesterday, though, I would love to see the plans, the preliminary plans. These are, I know it's a private hybrid situation.
Yeah, public-private partnership.
But since we're paying, taxpayers like you and I are going to pay for it long term, I feel like the preliminary plans need to be made public. It's kind of like the jail. I mean, all the way through the jail process, as you well know, and you went to the meetings, the plans were on the table, and public could view those plans. Of course, people don't really care about jails near as much schools.
Yes, they do.
But we're at a crossroads where we need a state-of-the-art workforce development type school, that STEM school. And Hal Crocker and I have talked briefly, but I appreciate all the hours and all the time and all the effort. And it's a win-win anytime we can get, like you say, the city to invest $10 million and the county $10 million or $20 million. That's a win-win. I'm not against any of that.
All right. Another issue that's not part of your plan, but has been discussed by at least one group of the last 2 school boards, and that is the idea of trying to get students not to start school at 7:15 in the morning at the middle school and high school level, because it is demonstrated. We've even had our 2 psychologists in this studio who have said it is one of the most devastating things to academic performance to ask students to catch a bus at 6 in the morning, means they got to get up at 5 or 5:30, if not earlier, and then get to a class that starts at 7:15 in the morning. There's not been, we've had 2 superintendents who have not found a way to do this. Where do you stand on it? And number 2, how would you make it happen?
Well, Steve, it's good news to me. I'm smiling because this is one thing you and I agree on. Yeah. A lot of things we don't now. We're 100% agree on that. And I think it's absolute nonsense that we have not already switched around, because all the scores and all the data, and it's all across the country. You're exactly right. And your professor here at Union spoke out, 2 years ago?
Yes.
And I don't think it's going to cost us any more. In fact, it may save money. One thing about when you do away with middle schools, instead of going to 3 stops, we only have 2. So instead of spending $6 million, I think we'll save $1 million on transportation. But back to the buses themselves, what people don't realize, it's kind of like if I drive 20,000 miles a year, and I have 2 vehicles now, but I'm going to still go 20,000 miles, but next year I want to use 4 vehicles. Well, actually, the cost per mile is the same. So I contend we could buy 25 more buses, and the cost per mile would be the same. It actually doesn't cost additional funds to go to a one bell time system. The only thing we're going to run into is when you go buy those 25 buses that are $100,000 roughly, by the way, with air conditioning, $90,000 without. When you go buy those buses, and you've got the county has to pay about 3% interest for those 15 years or 10 years to get them paid for. But that's only $50,000 a year. So for $50,000 a year, we can provide buses all the way around. Now, what I ran into, I've got some friends who are school bus drivers, and they're very much against that idea because it's going to take hours away from them, and they're afraid they're going to lose their benefits. But in the end of the day, I even told my friends who are school bus drivers, I said, well, listen, I understand you want to protect your job and you want to protect your position, all this, but the number one decision, our board has to decide what's best for the children, not what's best for school bus drivers. Plus, I don't think Sumner County is a good example. They're on pretty much one bell time, or what they call a little staggered bell time, only 15, 20 minutes. And what they did was just change their policy where they gave full benefits to school bus drivers at 22 hours. Our policy now is full benefits at 32 hours. So our bus drivers are thinking we're going to lose our benefits if we go to that one bell time. And that's a lot of resistance. I know board members have told me they got several calls from school bus drivers saying, no way, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. But again,
and we have heard that comment made that there's a real fear because of the number of jobs or hours that it might cut for those people. Right. But and without sounding callous in any way, but the studies indicate that academic performance does improve if these kids at their age, at the adolescent years, get more sleep.
I would say I'm 100% in support. If I get a chance to speak before the board, I'm going to say that over and over because I think it's documented, it's well documented, and even the Center for Disease Control has a study on it, and therefore, and they say we're hindering the adolescents. And I tell you, if you got me up, but again, what it does, Steve, it impacts the poor and the underserved more than it does the privileged. Because the privileged parents, they have transportation, and even though school begins at 7:15, they can allow their student to sleep to almost 6:45 or 6:50, get them up, rush them to school. And so, they're doing okay. But the poor kids whose parents do not have transportation, they've got to catch that school bus sometime as early as 5:45. And by the way, I almost ran over a child about 5 years ago. That's why it's really personal to me, because it was dark. It was in the wintertime, and I didn't see him. And I had to swerve to miss him. And I thought, my, what are they doing out here in the dark at 10 minutes to 6? And they were catching a school bus. So we can do better. That's an exact point where for $60,000, and even if you figure the interest or the school bus, you give more benefits to school bus drivers, which they probably need to raise anyway. And say it costs $90 million or $90,000. $90,000 to a $120 million budget is 0.8%. I mean, what are we doing to ourselves? Again, as a taxpayer, we're spending $10,400 per student, and we're handicapped. We're like tying one hand behind our back and say, well, teachers, just work a little harder. We know you can do it. When you were really, we're starting off with a handicap.
All right, I got one final question before, and then I'm going to give you 2 minutes to have the last word and say what you'd like to the audience. You brought this up yesterday during the course, and I'm saying again, yesterday as we were taping this. You brought this up at one point during your discussion with the Long Range Planning Committee, and you said it has been said, and it has been, that you are the person who has been pulling the string of specific school board members because of your influence in their campaigns and for a variety of other reasons in which people in this community have suggested that you have been wielding the political influence over some members of what has been known as the Five, or the Power Five. All right, I'm going to give you a chance up front to answer that question. You said largely no. All right, your turn.
Well, first of all, as you can tell, the whole issue about our local schools is near and dear to me. I'm an advocate, and I have conversations almost every day. And so it's just as natural as me as walking to the car to talk about schools. And so I'm an advocate. I have been an advocate. I've talked to all sorts of folks, encouraged them. It was kind of interesting. I know there was a school board candidate last year that I actually saw on your page or something. That she,
yes,
and she was
Kara Reeves.
Yeah,
I
right.
know where we're going.
And Kara, right. And Kara happened to have Doris had a lot of folks working for her. They're also good friends of Kara, and their districts are adjacent to one another. And they kept saying, why don't you help Kara? Why don't you help Kara? Because I was helping Doris. And so we realized out at Northside, people really did want that Northside Elementary School, and they didn't want the high school to get any larger. And so I did reach out to Kara and I said, Kara, why don't you go with that same approach? I said, you will win. Her district has all the houses in front of Northside. I said, you'd probably pick up 300 to 500 votes. But as probably Kara said, she never responded back to me, and it stopped right there.
Her answer was, paraphrasing, for the school board not to listen to you.
Well, and that's fine. You know, that's one thing I found out. I've been a change agent for about 50 years now. I go to my Pope Park days, my juvenile court days, even at Inglewood Baptist Church. I was the one that was advocate of buying the old English Inn, and most people thought I was crazy when we started doing that. You know, and I was the one that actually engaged. Dr. Jed had come up with the idea 3 or 4 years earlier, but he had backed off of it. I was the one that picked it up. But anyway, when you're a change agent, that's what's going to happen. But I don't have any malice towards anyone. And Kara's a great lady, and she's a good educator. And you know, I know she was as disappointed as anybody on the Vision 2020 vote. And she and Shannon are good friends, and so and I have a lot of mutual friends with Shannon, so that was always a difficult situation for me anyway. I got a background in juvenile court services, and so does Shannon. Right, and so I don't have any hard feelings about all that. But I am an advocate as far as all the board members. Now, as far as this board pulling their strings, what I said yesterday, and it's been demonstrated historically. These board members are voting against things that I'm for. I mean,
not everything that you're for.
Well, I know, but gosh, there's been a lot of votes. I'm always for opening Melissa's school. They voted not to open Melissa's school. The ones you're talking about, even Doris Black, did not.
Well, there were some people who didn't cast a specific vote on that. They just stayed because the vote was 3-4-2 on that.
Well, if I'd have been there and I'd have been voting, I'd have voted for it, because I think in the long haul it saves $15 million to taxpayers.
That's what you say. It saves
that's
$15
what
million.
I say. That's what I say. When you're an advocate, you got to say it.
Yeah, I get that.
You know,
all right.
But over and over again, there's several things that voted, but in recent situations, I never would have voted for the 6 through 12 school. I don't like that. Now that you just put me down on the books for that one. In fact, that's contrary to all these studies I give. You don't want to put those 6th and 7th graders, 8th graders who need nurturing with that kind of climate rotating classes. It's the bad thing to do with inner city students. Now, if we're north of the county or we're down in Collierville somewhere, it's a whole different ballgame.
If this board were to pass your plan, even with a 5-4 vote, if that was what would happen, if this board was to pass your plan and you turned out not to be the superintendent of schools, do you have anyone in mind specifically that you would like to see, at least that's local, that you would like to see administer this plan?
Well,
as a future superintendent, let's assume that the decision they're going to stick with, that Ray Washington is a short-term superintendent.
Two things I need to say. What you're going to say is, number one, you say 5-4 decision. If you go and look all across Tennessee and the way the law is about superintendents being appointed, and you look at our history, there's been a whole lot of 5-4 votes. I mean,
no question about it.
Vision 2020 essentially may have been a 5-4 vote because George Neely and Joe Mays actually got on the affirming side where they might be able to bring it back up. So it really was maybe a 5-4 decision.
But it was a 6-3 vote.
Well, a 6-3 vote, right. But it just goes to say, there's been if you go back through our history, there's been a lot of 5-4 things. So it's not anything wrong.
Goes, look, I'm not arguing that point with you, because that goes all the way back to when that consolidated ward first started, and there were a lot of city-county warfares on that. Lots of 5-4 votes. Yeah, bring it fast forward to when we got in the early part of this decade. And one of the reasons Nancy Zambito said that she made the decision not to seek a new contract is because she said, even if I was hired again, I knew the board would have a lot of 5-4 votes, and she said the community can't take it.
Well, that's what, we had a lot of superintendent turnover. We had it in Memphis.
We've had 11 superintendents in the 30 years of a consolidated board.
Right, but here in West Tennessee in the last 12 months, we've had about 4 or 5.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a tough role, and that's maybe why we need to see this law change. Maybe we need to go back to publicly electing superintendents.
So you might, I'm not saying that you would, but you said we ought to take a look at that, about electing a superintendent?
I think that bill's been before the Tennessee legislature.
If we did that, do you think the school board members should continue to be elected, or would you go back to an appointed board?
Well, I'm not sure. I've not thought that all the way through, but I like the idea. Someone said not too long ago, why don't we make it a local option and if you want to go with appointed board members and elect, let the counties make their decision. In our county, I think we'd probably go with a public elected superintendent.
I'm going to make an assumption here, but I presume that you do not favor recalls.
Well, no, actually, I probably would be for recalls. I think they'll all be for county commissioners and all elected officers.
Well, there are many people who say that there already are provisions to recall city council members or county commissions.
Right.
But it did not include school board members until this law was recently passed strictly for Madison County. And 2 people that you know, Doris Black and Kevin Alexander, there are recall petitions being circulated at this point. But you say that you might think that's not necessarily the worst of all ideas.
I recall the city of Jackson since the early 70s has had recall provisions even for the mayor's position. The mayor can be recalled.
Yeah.
But as far as I know, all the years I worked for the county and the county commission, there's no recall provision for county commissioners nor school board members. And of course, many people feel like this local law that really should have been a private act passed by 2/3 of the county commission. It was turned out to be a public act limited to only one county in the state. And I've had at least 5 attorneys say it's unconstitutional, that you can't limit to one county in the state. But even back to you, I say yes, voters should have all the power they possibly can. I don't mind at all there might be a recall. I feel like when people see the whole story and see the whole situation, they ride by that new school out here on the bypass and say it wouldn't be there except for
in other words, you think that's going to happen? You think that new school is going to happen on the bypass?
It should. I'm telling you. I don't know why anybody would want to put it over on Ashport Road and create more traffic hazards.
Well, there are many people who disagree with you on that, but you're entitled to your view.
Right, and I think those folks around North Side is going to get a new elementary school. You know what it means?
You're talking like somebody who's going to be a superintendent of schools. I mean, I'm serious, because you're already saying this new school, and I know you say that if you advocate, you got to say it, but you're talking like somebody who just believes it's going to be there.
Well, I've been out there on the streets around Northside, and I tell you, I watch people's eyes light up because they can almost see the school from their house, and they don't have kids in the school, but they know what it means probably is their property values go up about $10,000 overnight. The day that new school and elementary school opens up, it's going to be really good for the Northside area. And plus, they have assurance in that Northside didn't get large again.
We didn't get a firm answer to one of my questions before I let you have the floor for the last 2 minutes. And that's this. If you were not the superintendent of schools and this plan passed, do you have in mind somebody that you would like to see who could administer it and do it the way you think it should be done?
You know, again, I'll speak, but I'm just one of 40,000 voters.
That's all I'm asking you is one person.
I would vote for Ray Washington.
Okay, you vote for Ray Washington.
I don't see any reason why. He surrounds himself with the right educators, and he's got a good team, good start. Dr. Michael's got great credentials. So is Dr. Kirkbride, and on and on. I would say he probably needs to add a couple people to his team. But I tell you, the model I looked at is over in Shelby County. They've had problems for 40 years with superintendents. And they hired a fellow that was named Dorsey. He turns out he was not an educator at all, but he was a good manager. And he stayed there, what, 5 years?
Yeah.
And when he left, they were heartbroken because he had done such a great job. So I think the wisdom in Tennessee, not requiring it to be an educator, is that you can sometimes find somebody that's just a real good manager, like we do city managers, and put them in charge. So I got great, now most of my friends would disagree with me probably. They'd say, oh, Ray's not an educator. I even had teachers tell me, no, it can't be Ray Washington, he's not an educator. Well, like me, I'm saying, like you said, I really feel like it's got to be somebody pretty much local. I think it's very difficult to bring somebody in from out of state and then them have to catch up to speed. I mean, I would vote for you to be superintendent.
I wouldn't. That's not my area
but I
of
would,
expertise.
Steve. Honestly, you know more about this district than most anybody. You and Steve Shirley can quote facts and figures and dates and times and votes like nobody else. And that's the kind of insight someone needs to have in order to lead this.
I think we're better being the watchdogs than in that role. I want to thank you so much for coming. Sure. This has been a spirited exchange. There have been some straightforward questions. I do appreciate you coming in because I think there are a lot of things that needed to get out on the table. And I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Look right into camera 2
Which
here.
camera, number 2?
Number 2, and just say, tell you what, we'll have you look into camera 1 over here.
Okay.
I'm going to give you 2 minutes to have the last word.
Okay. Thank you, Steve, again, for being able to come and to speak to folks. And number one, I have no ill will, no malice. I know Steve, as he says, he's a bulldog or a watchdog reporter. So are some other local folks, even my friend Brandon Shields at Jackson-Son, and even Keith Shirley. And they have wore me out on my names, and I know my name has been pitched back and forth, but please understand that I'm here because of my passion, and it's something that goes way back, and it's who I am, and as much as anything I attribute to my years with Judge Walter Baker Harris, one of the finest public servants we've ever had in Madison County. He was a juvenile court judge for 40 years, and he did a lot of great things. And he always told me, Brent, we don't have bad children, we have bad parents. And he never let me give up on any child. And most of the children we work with were from the poor areas of East Jackson. And I can't get that out of my system. I know they can do it. They can succeed. But we're in a situation here in Madison County, we're all about investment. We want return on our investment. And whether we like it or not, there's 3,000 students in our district that comes from the underserved areas. And they're poor. Their parents do not have a car. Their parents cannot afford to drive them the time nor the expense, and they don't have a physical car to drive to the Montessori school or to the Madison Academic High. And so we got to take them in mind. And we can look the other way and say, oh, well, we can't do anything for them, Brent, because, it's their home life. We can take that approach, and I feel like that's where we've been for about the last 8 years or so. It's like, what we need to do is spend more money on newer schools out north and Montessori and Madison. We need to really get that going better and better. But you see, that leaves these other children on the curb, so to speak. And as a minister of the gospel, that Jesus says in Matthew, to the least of these, I know that's our heart of everybody, but please consider these, as an advocate, consider it. I come from the juvenile court services perspective. I just have to admit that. And a background of 6 years or so education and 2 degrees in education. So I want you as parents now, as taxpayers, please call your school board member and say, Dr. Lay is right about some of this. He's right about this. They need to take a good, hard, long look. And if you're a parent at Pope and Thelma Barker or Liberty, get on the phone with your school board members and the local superintendent's office and say, yes, I would take my child to that school quickly if it was offered this next 90 days. Thank you so much. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Brent. And also, I have to add, in fairness, for those of you who do not agree with Dr. Lay, get on the phone and call your school board members and express your opinions. That's why democracy is what it is. Thank you again, and I hope we can do this again soon.
Sure. Sounds great. Thank you.
Brent Lay with us here on West Tennessee Today. And remember, when news breaks out, we break in. Thank you for joining us.